The aliens thought they understood the galaxy. Every species they had cataloged followed predictable patterns: a rise, a peak, and an inevitable decline. Stability was the currency of survival. Civilizations that thrived under chaos were anomalies, quickly crushed by the unforgiving logic of entropy. But then, in a sector they had long dismissed as marginal, they found humans. It began innocuously, a flicker on sensors that should have indicated chaos-induced collapse. Entire planets appeared to be in disorder, populations scattering, governments fragmenting, economies imploding, and yet the species endured. Not only endured, but expanded. The first reconnaissance fleets approached cautiously, expecting to witness the death throes of a failing civilization. What they found instead was ingenuity in motion. Cities reconstructed overnight after disasters. Leaders who should have been overthrown survived by the sheer audacity of their decisions. And communities that appeared to be tearing themselves apart reemerged stronger, more adaptive, more terrifyingly alive. The aliens' initial reports were met with incredulity by their own councils. "It is impossible," they said. "A species cannot thrive in chaos. Their neural architecture should collapse under dissonance. Their social cohesion fail. Their ecosystems collapse. They should be extinct." Yet the humans endured, and more than that, they evolved. The aliens began detailed observation. Satellites, probes, psychic sensors, computational modeling all were employed to analyze the phenomenon. They cataloged wars that should have annihilated populations, economic crashes that should have reduced entire cities to rubble, political upheavals that should have splintered nations into factions. And each time, humans emerged not weaker, but stronger, adaptive in ways that defied conventional logic. Chaos was not their weakness, it was their nourishment. Where other species required structure, order, and meticulous planning to flourish, humans thrived in disorder. It was as if the unpredictability itself acted as a stimulant, forcing them to innovate, to improvise, to create strategies on the fly that no other species could conceive. The aliens debated the implications. On other worlds, a single sudden disruption could collapse a civilization entirely. A famine, a coup, an invasion, each would spell the end. Humans, however, appeared to treat calamity as an opportunity. A flood? They built higher, faster, more ingeniously. An invasion? They weaponized whatever was at hand, often with no centralized command, and turned defeat into victory through sheer unpredictability. Economic collapse? They invented new markets, new systems, new currencies, and made profit off the panic. Their biology mirrored their social adaptability. Humans were fragile in isolation, but formidable in improvisation. A human alone was unremarkable, vulnerable to even minor environmental stresses, but collectively, in dynamic, seemingly uncoordinated networks, they became a force no alien strategy could anticipate. Their communication was chaotic, their alliances temporary and shifting, yet somehow the species synchronized when needed, often unpredictably, always effectively. The aliens recorded these phenomena, naming them adaptive entropy loops, a term that even their most advanced scholars admitted lacked adequate explanation. And then the humans noticed the observers. Not the fleets themselves, they remained hidden, but the consequences of observation. Humans on Earth and the few colonies beyond began producing technologies that made detection more difficult, sometimes outright weaponizing the surveillance against the unsuspecting alien probes. From the alien perspective, it was as if humans were aware of their own unpredictability and consciously amplified it when under scrutiny. The galactic councils convened emergency sessions. "We cannot predict them," one envoy admitted. "We cannot model them. Every calculation fails." The older species of the galaxy, those with millennia of experience and near-perfect computational foresight, found themselves baffled. Even minor interventions often produced wildly unexpected results. Attempting to subdue human populations with traditional methods, diplomacy, coercion, war, only showcased human resilience. Bombardments failed to incite surrender. Blockades bred innovation. Negotiations, when conducted under stress, revealed entirely new cultural frameworks the aliens had never anticipated. It became evident humans were not merely chaotic, they were chaos incarnate, refined, evolved, and unapologetically thriving within it. One field researcher, a xenobiologist, documented the human response to a simulated planetary disaster. The aliens had created a controlled ecological collapse, flooding rivers, destabilizing food sources, and introducing environmental toxins to test resilience. Within hours, humans adapted. New shelters arose spontaneously, trade networks reconfigured overnight, and what should have been societal breakdown instead became a complex, self-regulating system. The aliens were forced to confront a frightening truth. The very conditions they had assumed would destroy a civilization were the ones in which humans reached their apex. Their minds, apparently erratic, were capable of rapid synthesis of information, improvisation of tools, and coordination across networks that appeared random but were internally coherent. Humans weaponized unpredictability. In one documented instance, two factions that had been in conflict for decades suddenly united against a third external threat, using strategies that no alien war theorist had ever conceived. The aliens attempted to model these interactions mathematically, but each simulation failed spectacularly. Every predictive framework collapsed in the face of human ingenuity. The very concept of predictability, an axiom upon which their understanding of galactic civilizations rested, was being challenged. For the first time in recorded history, a species demonstrated evolution not through incremental adaptation to environmental stability, but through mastery of instability itself. Across the galaxy, other species began to whisper in alarm. Could humans be the first truly post-structural civilization? Could a species survive, even thrive, without the scaffolding of order, hierarchy, or rigid planning? The philosophical implications rattled the core of alien thought. Their entire understanding of life, evolution, and survival required reassessment. And yet, amid this intellectual turmoil, there was a practical fear. If humans thrived on chaos, what would happen when the aliens themselves intervened? Could the simple act of observation be weaponized by humans to destabilize an entire sector? Fear, for the first time, was unanimous across species. Humans were not merely unpredictable, they were adaptive chaos giving form. They were a force of nature the galaxy could not control, contain, or fully comprehend. And as the first fleets prepared to make contact, the collective instinct of alien species was not anticipation, but panic. The aliens believed war was a science, a predictable equation of strength, numbers, and logistics. On their worlds, campaigns were meticulously planned, contingencies calculated decades in advance, and deviation from protocol punished with swift, brutal consequences. Yet, the humans approached conflict like a game played in a constantly shifting maze, rules changing mid-match, objectives evolving in real time. When the first human fleet emerged from the Outer Rim, it was not a formation of disciplined ships and neat ranks. It was a swarm of unidentifiable vessels, some cobbled together from derelict stations, others painted in colors that violated every known camouflage protocol, each piloted by crews whose behavior seemed erratic to alien sensors. The humans didn't attack in formation. They attacked in waves, in splinters, in feints so unpredictable that the aliens' most advanced tactical models failed before the first volley even landed. Where an alien commander would see failure, humans saw opportunity. Retreats became traps, ambushes became supply lines, and what looked like improvisation to the observing aliens was, in fact, an entirely new form of warfare, adaptive chaos warfare. On one planet, the aliens tested human resilience deliberately. They deployed a fleet meant to intimidate, dropping orbital bombardments on major human cities, expecting panic, surrender, and submission. Instead, humans mobilized, not in protest, but in innovation. Factories designed for consumer goods suddenly produced defensive drones. Civilians armed themselves with improvised weapons. Engineers converted everyday machinery into autonomous security devices, and the target cities became fortresses of ingenuity. The alien sensors recorded an anomaly. Stress levels among humans did not spike, they normalized. The more intense the threat, the more organized the response. Calculated chaos, the xenobiologists wrote, was a hallmark of human evolution. But the most unnerving aspect was not the human survival, it was their enjoyment of it. Humans laughed in the midst of disaster, sang songs during sieges, and celebrated victories that alien commanders couldn't even define as strategic. Their culture glorified improvisation, celebrated the unexpected, and rewarded audacity. For the aliens, accustomed to orderly hierarchies and rigid protocols, this was terrifying. Philosophers among the observing fleets debated for weeks. Was this resilience or something darker? A species that treated destruction as play, instability as a stage for theater, suffering as fuel for evolution? The first direct communication was chaotic in itself. The aliens opened channels expecting rational negotiation, perhaps a plea for diplomacy. Instead, the humans responded with a barrage of contradictory signals. Some messages were diplomatic, some were outright taunts, and some were encoded in humor, riddles, or cultural references the aliens could not decipher. Attempts to extract intent failed. Every interpretation generated new anomalies. Humans had weaponized confusion as effectively as they did kinetic energy. The aliens tried economic warfare next, cutting off supply lines, sabotaging trade routes, and attempting to isolate human colonies. But humans adapted. They used the very instability to generate new economies, barter networks, and opportunistic alliances with species the aliens considered inferior or irrelevant. What should have been pressure became power. Every attempt to destabilize humans failed because the humans had evolved to thrive not despite chaos, but because of it. And it wasn't limited to conflict or economics. Humans reshaped entire environments to suit their improvisational genius. On planets with volatile climates, they constructed modular cities that could relocate overnight. On worlds with unstable ecosystems, they engineered adaptive biodomes, symbiotic farming systems, and automated resource networks that seemed to anticipate environmental shifts. The aliens began to realize that human technology was not advanced because of superior engineering, but because it had evolved to exploit unpredictability. Where other species sought to impose order on nature, humans learned to dance with chaos, making it their ally, not their enemy. Observation reports flooded galactic councils. Humans could convert disasters into resources, misfortune into opportunity, and instability into dominance. In one documented case, a solar flare destroyed a human orbital station. Within days, the survivors had scavenged the wreckage to construct a more resilient base, integrated new energy harvesting technology from the very event that destroyed the first station, and established a defensive perimeter that alien forces could not penetrate. Philosophers were forced to confront a frightening concept. Humans did not merely survive adversity, they used it to accelerate evolution. Their neural architecture, their culture, and their technology. By the time the alien councils fully realized the extent of human unpredictability, the humans had already moved beyond defense into deliberate expansion. Where other species sought to impose order on newly contacted worlds, humans saw opportunity in the disorder already present. They did not conquer with fleets alone. They infiltrated markets, cultures, and networks, often simultaneously. Planets that should have resisted were instead drawn into alliances that appeared accidental, almost chaotic, yet delivered strategic advantages the aliens could not anticipate. Humans were not bound by unity, hierarchy, or consistency in the way alien civilizations understood. Their political factions often conflicted, their corporations competed ruthlessly, and their social structures seemed to fragment endlessly. Yet within this apparent disarray was a dynamic, self-organizing intelligence, a network of improvisation that allowed humans to turn unpredictable conditions into leverage. The aliens observed as humans manipulated interstellar trade to provoke crises, then exploited those crises for technological and political gain. Economic collapses were met with innovative solutions that left entire sectors in awe. Where one human colony would sabotage another, the resulting chaos often produced technologies, alliances, or social experiments that strengthened humanity as a whole. No alien strategy could anticipate which move would yield advantage, and the very unpredictability made humans impossible to model. Philosophers across the galaxy began to ask questions that shook the foundations of xenobiology, sociology, and military science. Was human evolution following rules, or was it rewriting the rules entirely? Could a species truly evolve by thriving in instability, or were humans something altogether new, a force of nature disguised as a civilization? First contact with alien species across the galaxy became a spectacle in itself. Humans did not merely arrive, they appeared in waves of asymmetry. Diplomats in some places, traders in others, adventurers and scientists scattered across multiple systems simultaneously. Aliens attempting to monitor or control these interactions found themselves outmaneuvered by the very chaos they relied upon to maintain control. A diplomatic envoy arriving at one human settlement might negotiate peacefully, while a neighboring colony launched surprise technological demonstrations that rendered alien defenses obsolete. Even internal conflicts among humans, which should have weakened them, served as training grounds for improvisation, innovation, and the testing of strategies that could later be deployed on the galactic stage. Humans understood instability not as a liability, but as a medium for experimentation. Their society evolved like a storm, unpredictable, violent, yet self-organizing, with each surge producing new structures stronger than the last. Alien intelligence agencies attempted to track these movements, but every observation produced new variables. Fleets redirected to intercept human convoys found that the humans had anticipated their movements, rerouted shipments, and engaged in tactics that combined deception, improvisation, and psychology in ways the aliens could not even classify as warfare. Chaos became a weapon, a shield, and a strategy all at once. Some alien commanders began to whisper rumors of a terrifying possibility. Humans did not merely respond to chaos, they created it intentionally. Through sabotage, misinformation, and engineered crises, humans manipulated the galaxy's perception of disorder. Yet, paradoxically, these actions often strengthened their alliances and consolidated power in ways the aliens could not parse. Even the concept of loyalty took on a new dimension. Humans allied with beings they had never met, with motivations that seemed irrational, only to later exploit the same alliances to maximum strategic advantage. The aliens struggled to comprehend these interactions. They were trained to model relationships based on rational self-interest and predictable outcomes. Yet human alliances operated on principles that were fluid, opportunistic, and adaptive. Where alien diplomats saw inconsistency, humans saw flexibility. Where they saw treachery, humans saw experimentation. And where they saw risk, humans saw opportunity. Across thousands of light years, human influence expanded not through domination, but through unpredictability. A single human outpost could trigger cascading effects across entire systems, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes deliberately, but always with outcomes that strengthened humanity's reach. Alien fleets attempting to respond often found themselves trapped by contingencies they could not foresee. By the time a strategy was devised, humans had already adapted, bypassed, or weaponized it.
Even alien philosophers struggled with comprehension. The human's evolutionary path seemed to reject conventional logic. On other worlds, species had evolved to maximize efficiency, predictability, and survival under stable conditions. Humans thrived in entropy. Their neurology, culture, and social organization coalesced into an emergent intelligence capable of improvising solutions in the face of any variable. Alien scholars began to study human games, economics, and social rituals, attempting to extract patterns. They discovered that humans taught themselves adaptability, often through play, chaos, and experimentation. They laughed in the face of disaster, celebrated risk, and built resilience through experience that would have destroyed any other species. Militarily, this translated into unpredictability that alien strategists could not counter. Every conventional tactic, flanking, overwhelming force, blockade, was rendered ineffective by chaos. Humans inverted this assumption. Chaos was not the exception, it was the environment in which they thrived, and order, where it existed, was a temporary tool rather than a foundation. The human's unpredictability was no longer just tactical, it became strategic, philosophical, and cultural. Aliens realized that in attempting to control humans, they were playing a game with no rules, where their own understanding of cause and effect was weaponized against them. Reports circulated of entire alien fleets withdrawing from regions after minimal encounters, not due to casualties, but because the humans had demonstrated, through improvisation, sabotage, and social manipulation, that conventional assumptions were obsolete. The galaxy had never encountered a species that could take advantage of disorder as systematically as humans. By the end of the first decade of human expansion beyond Earth, alien species no longer saw humanity as a predictable force. They saw them as architects of instability, masters of improvisation, and harbingers of a new kind of evolution that defied every principle the galaxy had long accepted. Fear became a universal sentiment. And yet, within the human networks, there was no grand plan, no coordinated agenda, just the instinctual drive to adapt, create, and thrive. Chaos was not merely a tool for humans, it was their language, their philosophy, and their ultimate weapon.
By the time human influence had reached multiple sectors, the aliens' initial panic had crystallized into outright fear. Fleets that once sailed confidently now hesitated, recalculating, second-guessing, and delaying orders. Any engagement with human forces was fraught with uncertainty. Predictions failed, contingencies collapsed, and traditional notions of tactical advantage became meaningless. Human expansion was not simply territorial, it was a war of perception, a demonstration of the species' ability to convert disorder into strategic supremacy. On contested worlds, humans arrived not as invaders, but as catalysts. Planetary factions already on the brink of collapse would find themselves subtly nudged into alliances or conflicts that, while appearing random, strengthened human influence and destabilized alien control. The aliens tried to respond systematically, imposing blockades, launching surgical strikes, establishing intelligence networks. Yet every measure only fed the humans' adaptive strategies. Supply lines rerouted themselves through unexpected channels. Civilian populations repurposed alien technology to build defenses or infrastructure, and networks of human colonies acted as distributed intelligence nodes, responding instantaneously to environmental, political, or military changes. In essence, the humans had transformed chaos itself into infrastructure. The first direct military confrontation occurred in the Athenian Rift, a cluster of resource-rich systems the aliens had long considered secure. An alien fleet of unprecedented size moved to engage human colonies, confident that numerical superiority and coordinated tactics would secure victory. Yet the humans did not meet them head-on. Instead, they scattered, fragmented, and reappeared in unpredictable vectors, their fleets adapting in real time to alien maneuvers. Entire battleships were repurposed mid-combat, weapon systems reconfigured, engines rerouted, crew reassigned, all without central coordination. Alien commanders watched in disbelief as their formations dissolved, not because of brute force, but because human improvisation rendered conventional strategy irrelevant. The humans' genius lay in their perception of chaos as both shield and sword. They could retreat and attack simultaneously, surrender and dominate, break alliances and reinforce them in ways that no alien mind could predict. Every engagement became a study in adaptability, where alien strength became irrelevant and the humans' creativity dictated the battlefield. On civilian worlds, the story was even stranger. Where the aliens expected rebellion, the humans organized defense networks spontaneously, leveraging the same chaos that threatened them. Markets, transportation, and communication systems became decentralized, resilient, and adaptive. Entire populations learned improvisational tactics and weaponized local resources, transforming every urban environment into a battlefield tailored by necessity and opportunity. Alien scholars and strategists were forced to conclude that humans did not merely survive instability, they flourished in it. Philosophers debated whether humanity represented a new form of life, one evolved not for order, but for perpetual entropy. Every assumption about control, predictability, and governance was questioned. Entire doctrines were discarded, replaced by desperate models attempting to anticipate the unanticipatable. Some alien species began to speculate that humans were not fully biological. Perhaps they had been engineered by an unknown force designed to exploit chaos itself. But even this hypothesis failed to account for the cultural, technological, and philosophical sophistication that humans displayed in response to unpredictable events. The humans themselves were not unified in intent. They acted as independent nodes within a collective, improvising constantly, yet producing outcomes that were always advantageous. Leaders, scientists, engineers, and civilians each contributed to the emergent intelligence of the species. The aliens could not predict which individual action would trigger the next cascade of influence, and the humans seemed unconcerned with central coordination. In one documented campaign, humans manipulated a sector-wide energy crisis that should have crippled planetary defenses. Instead, they improvised, converting civilian vehicles into energy harvesters, integrating alien technology scavenged from previous encounters, and coordinating responses through a decentralized but perfectly adaptive communication network.
By the time alien fleets arrived to enforce compliance, the humans had turned scarcity into power, inefficiency into innovation, and panic into profit. Alien councils convened emergency sessions, recognizing that traditional tactics, centralized governance, and predictive models were insufficient. Humanity had redefined what it meant to be a dominant species. Their adaptability rendered the alien assumption that chaos inevitably leads to collapse obsolete. For the first time, an entire galaxy faced a species that could turn instability into an engine of growth, a species for which disorder was a medium of creation rather than destruction. And in the midst of this, the humans themselves remained remarkably unaware of the fear they inspired. Their actions were driven not by desire to dominate, but by instinct, improvisation, and the relentless pursuit of survival and opportunity. Every act, however playful or chaotic, had strategic consequences the aliens could only attempt to comprehend. Philosophers debated whether humanity was conscious of its own advantage, or if the advantage was merely a byproduct of evolutionary adaptation. Some suggested that humans represented a natural anomaly, a species whose power lay not in structure, force, or numbers, but in the dynamic flexibility to exploit unpredictability with creativity and courage. By the end of Part 4, the galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented, a species that did not fear chaos, but commanded it, shaping it into a tool for survival, influence, and strategic mastery. Alien fleets withdrew, not due to defeat, but because engagement without comprehension was too dangerous. Human improvisation had become both shield and sword, philosophy and strategy, instinct and innovation. And as the humans continued to spread, the central truth became clear across species. The galaxy had not encountered chaos, it had encountered humanity, and humanity thrived within it.
By the time the fifth decade of interstellar observation had passed, humans were no longer a curiosity. They were a paradigm. Alien fleets, once confident in their superiority, now approached human systems with trepidation. Every interaction had proven the same unyielding truth. Humans thrived where others faltered, succeeded where others failed, and transformed every chaotic variable into a weapon of ingenuity. Across the galaxy, the pattern was unmistakable. Worlds that should have fallen into disorder became hubs of improvisational brilliance. Economic collapses turned into technological revolutions. Political fractures became networks of adaptive alliances. Natural disasters became opportunities for innovation and resilience. Every setback, whether environmental, military, or social, was a catalyst for human advancement. Alien civilizations began to recognize a disturbing reality. Their own principles of order, stability, and predictability were vulnerabilities when measured against the human paradigm. Systems built for control collapsed under human improvisation, and strategies crafted with centuries of logic and foresight were rendered obsolete by instinctive, adaptive decision-making. Humans were not merely unpredictable, they were evolutionary outliers, a species that had internalized chaos, mastered it, and weaponized it at scales that alien civilizations could scarcely comprehend. Entire sectors of the galaxy were transformed not by conquest, but by human ingenuity acting in apparent randomness. Alien leaders debated whether to attempt containment or coexistence. But containment, they realized, was a fool's endeavor. Every attempt to restrict human influence backfired. Even the strictest embargoes became opportunities for black market innovation, technological breakthroughs, and adaptive alliances that strengthened humanity. Coexistence, too, was precarious. To negotiate with humans was to accept that traditional logic could no longer dictate outcomes. Diplomacy itself became a game of improvisation, risk, and perpetual uncertainty.
Yet, despite their adaptability, humans did not act with malice toward other species. Their expansion was driven by curiosity, survival, and opportunity, not conquest for conquest's sake. They created networks of influence, facilitated technological sharing, and engineered social structures that, while chaotic, fostered resilience and growth. The aliens, however, could not separate admiration from fear. Humanity had become a living paradox, fragile in isolation, unstoppable in adaptation, disordered in appearance, terrifyingly effective in execution. One of the greatest minds among the alien councils proposed a theory that would shake galactic philosophy for generations. Humans were the first truly post-structural species, evolved not to survive stability, but to thrive in perpetual chaos. They had redefined the rules of life, challenging assumptions about evolution, society, and intelligence. Their presence demanded a reevaluation of what it meant to dominate a galaxy. In time, humans themselves seemed almost indifferent to the chaos they orchestrated or exploited. They celebrated invention, exploration, and challenge, embracing unpredictability as both a playground and a proving ground. Their culture reinforced adaptability, resilience, and improvisation, ensuring that every generation inherited not just tools, but instincts honed to master instability. Alien fleets observing these behaviors could only record, analyze, and marvel. No strategy, no algorithm, no doctrine could fully anticipate the next human move. Even when humans acted individually, their collective patterns emerged as an unstoppable force, a species whose survival and advancement depended upon turning chaos into creation. By the century's end, the galaxy's perception of humans had solidified. They were no longer simply another species, they were a force of nature, a living embodiment of unpredictability, a civilization that had evolved to thrive where all others would collapse. Philosophers, generals, and scientists across alien civilizations accepted a humbling truth. Humans had rewritten the equation of survival. Chaos, which had been the enemy of every other species, was humanity's ally. Instability, the greatest threat in the galaxy, was their medium. And the species that had once been underestimated, dismissed as fragile and irrational, now commanded a respect bordering on terror. The final report, compiled by the Interstellar Council's combined xenobiologists, strategists, and philosophers, concluded simply, humans cannot be predicted, humans cannot be controlled, humans cannot be contained. They are, in every sense, masters of chaos, architects of unpredictability, and the ultimate evolutionary triumph. And in the quiet moments between observation, when alien fleets withdrew to safe distances and analysts pondered the implications, a single truth emerged, undeniable and haunting. Every species in the galaxy, no matter how ancient or advanced, would eventually be forced to reckon with humanity. For the humans did not merely survive chaos, they elevated it, mastered it, and made it the foundation of their dominion. The galaxy had learned the hard way that unpredictability was not weakness, disorder was not failure, and chaos, when harnessed by humans, was not merely survival, it was power. And so humanity ascended, not as conquerors in the traditional sense, but as a force the universe itself could not predict, could not fully understand, and could not hope to defeat. They were chaos incarnate, civilization reimagined, and a reminder that the rules of the galaxy, however rigid, were merely suggestions to those who could bend them.